Hello, my name is Kieron Gillen, and you're listening to the Dom of X.
Hello everybody, I am Dom of X, comicreleases.com, assistant editor, and today I have the pleasure of talking to somebody who I have looked up to for so many years. You know him as the co-creator of Phonogram, the Power Fantasy, Wicked and Divine, Star Wars, Dr. Aphra, Immortal X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, Generation Hope, Young Avengers, Iron Man, Rise of the Powers of 10, X-Men Forever. I am talking to none other than Supermind Kieron Gillen. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm good, honestly. Anytime anyone hits that list of books, I find myself, oh my god, I am ancient. I will turn to dust. But no, honestly, I'm feeling really good. I'm about to end of the day. It's going to be a lovely chat. Then I'm going to cook some food for the family and sleep. So it's about as good as it gets.
What are you cooking tonight, if I may ask?
I tell you what, we've just got to make do with what's in the fridge. It's going to be a sort of, I've got some puff pastry we've got to use up. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be a kind of puff pastry. We've got some like soft cheese. It's going to be a puff pastry, come flan, come like whatever else we've got kind of going. So yeah, it's not fancy, but it is edible.
Okay.
Fingers crossed.
Well, at least tastes decent. You know, we can eat it. It's not like, oh, this is terrible.
Let's not count chickens yet. You know, something warm will end up on the table. That's all I'll say.
Okay, you know what? At least if it ends up in your stomach and you don't get sick from it and it fills and gratifies you, that is already a win in of itself, I think.
Exactly.
Exactly.
I forget whose line is it, but like everyone fed and nobody dead as a kind of general rule about parenting.
I don't know who said it.
Like, yeah. I think I might got it from Rachel. She does an awesome it doesn't matter, a comic about her. She had a 1-year-old, she had a kid a year after I had a kid. So it's just a really nice kind of slice of life comic. Rachel Smith. She's like a British indie cartoonist. She's really good.
Okay, I'm going to put that on the list because I feel like today will be nothing but epic references as one of the who have pioneered that. But nonetheless, still amazing to have you on and to talk to you about your work. How did you get into comics by chance?
I always sort of say I never read comics as a kid, and that's sort of a lie. In that, I read the comics that were around me, and I sort of drifted out as a teenager, and I came back hard in my early 20s. So I'm not like a lifer, I don't know, like someone like Fraction, who've been around forever. And right. I've been just kind of because where I came from, there's no comic shops. Mm-hmm. So in Stafford, there's no real access apart from the stuff in the newsagents. I say that, but one of my mates went to Birmingham and got comics, so it was part of the world. But I got into Watchmen when I was 21. I picked it when I was living in America for a year. I grabbed a copy of Watchmen on the way, and I had no TV. This is like 97, so
right.
I had no TV in my access, no internet in my room. So I was basically sitting in this room with a copy of Watchmen for a month before I got a TV. So and I read that so many times, and that's kind of the origin story of hyper obsession over Watchmen. But getting in properly was a few years. That's when I got into Alan Moore, really. I got into comics properly when I was 25, and I discovered to be honest, it was Alice Comics. I came in via the WEF, which of course feels very different now. And then I got, went to my first con, came back from my first con, after about 6 months after getting into comics, and then wrote my first script that night. And it kind of came from there. And in terms of breaking into comics, that kind of world in terms of the diaspora of the WEF, met a bunch of people, started doing zines, my own stuff, because I'm like a punk rock zine kid background. So it's always kind of, if you fall in love with something, you end up wanting to do it. And not in a good way, you just do it to express your love of it. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter if it's good or not. It's about you loving the form and playing with it. So I met people on the scene, relevantly Jamie McKelvie, who I was doing my first zine, selling a table, on a table selling my zine. McKelvie came up trying to find the person I was sharing a table with and showed me his portfolio. And apparently I instantly said, I've got an idea for a book called Phonogram, we should do it. That was the first thing I said. Or actually, the third thing. The first thing was, no, Alice isn't here. Mm-hmm. And the second was, but the third thing I said, actually, the second thing would have been yes to their questions. Do you want to see my art? So right. The third thing I said would have been, we should do Phonogram. Mm-hmm. And then it just kind of since I was around and doing work, eventually I was asked to pitch to Image. I think I was going to pitch it elsewhere first, but Lauren McCubbin at Image said, why the hell aren't you pitching at us? And luckily, an Anglophone publisher, Eric Stevenson, was in charge of the company. So he, instead of going, why the hell is this Britpop comic arrived on my desk? He said, yes, this is the kind of thing I like.
So it's a perfect synchronization of coincidence on top of I get to work with someone cool. I mean, you and Jamie, I feel like you guys are
Yeah.
one of the best duos ever in comics
It
right
feels
now.
incredibly lucky. Like you hear these kind of stories about how bands form, like they get this weird chance meeting, and it's like, oh yeah, exactly that. Immediately I saw him as like, I know you're the guy, in that I can see you love what I love. Um, he could tell he was read the same comics I was, and that kind of, oh no, you clearly love Hopeless Savages, or all that kind of early noughties Oni stuff. All that's in the mix. He knows why a pair of shoes matter, which really obviously matters to a book like Phonogram. But like, I mean, the honesty is like, if you're in a scene, you're playing the odds. You know what I mean? Like this is the advice I always give to new creators in terms of you've got to find your people. Like, and a lot of that involves going to cons or looking around online and finding, okay, who do you resonate with? Who do you vibe with? Because that's kind of the person you'll end up working with, really. And it's sort of like, it's like dating almost. Like you've got to go out and go on a load of bad dates before you find your person.
Right.
So, yeah.
I'm really glad that you two got together and have created so many cool comics together. I'm on top of just breaking overall into the industry. I mean, that has to be one of the biggest things for you, I'd imagine.
I'm incredibly blessed in that kind of like, as somebody who's got no training as a writer, and it's kind of like just sort of done everything himself via hyper obsession and meeting people and doing it. I feel like a pachinko ball is the metaphor I normally use. Like I'm a working class kid from Stafford. I feel that I'm aware that the ball could have bounced another way all the time. So I'm very grateful for what I get to do.
Oh man.
You know,
What is your schedule like for comics? Is it you have a set time in the day or the week where you're just like, I'm just going to write a script of power fantasy or whatever it might be that you're doing, or is it kind of sporadic in that aspect?
like I've got a 3-year-old now, so the schedule's more sporadic now than it used to be. I have a pretty firm. I've got ADHD. I have a pretty firm schedule to make sure I know to create a series of micro deadlines, so I know when I'm not behind. And that's like kind of like, deadlines is one of the ways I structure my brain. So the basic structure is I write new pages in the morning and I edit in the afternoon, or other edit and everything else. It's not quite that as much anymore due to the other, and I'm not as fast as I used to. I'm by choice not as fast as I used to be, I think, and I'm doing more difficult work in some ways, and like but also just I have to have my brains on other things. But that's my basic structure. Generative new work in the morning when I'm most awake, and then everything else for the rest of the day. Ideally, if I'm being good, I'll work out before starting work. Not always happen, Rarely happens now. It like hasn't happened less since Iris arrived. But yeah, I try to not work weekends because it's that kind of you don't. For me, it's like you don't plan to work weekends because then if you have to work weekends, you've got extra space. You know what I mean? I don't. It's one of the bit, especially when I started working at Marvel. They kind of tended to think not that I was slow, but they didn't know how fast I was because I didn't let them know.
Oh, I see. No advancing ahead of time.
Yeah, no, even like occasionally I got it quite easily, and definitely most editors stop giving me deadlines. Look, because I will always that's always a strong word, but like I will genuinely know when a script is needed and when they need it and preempt it. Since I used to work on magazines. I kind of, and since I ran, at Image, you run your own project to some degree. The sense of okay, what needs to be done now is very strong with me in that kind. And there's Alan Moore. I mean, this was in me anyway because editors beat me into me by throwing stuff at me. But like you had to, it's like working on a magazine. Let's say you got your regulars. Like you've got to get the regulars done before the issue starts because otherwise the designers have nothing to do in the first week, and that means that actually, if by actually doing it later, you're basically saying the designers are crunching more work into the last 3 weeks of the deadline. So all that kind of stuff, which is useful, because it's I said my ADHD is one of the reasons why I think I'm good at comics, in that it's a series of comics is a series of micro deadlines. You know what I mean? Like I do a script because I said I do new work in the morning. I try to do 5 pages a day. 5 new pages. In other words, it's like. By Thursday, I should have a complete script, and normally what I do is on Friday I polish. So that's that kind of like, so by the end of the week I've got a 20-page comic, and and if you are generally organised and have less distractions, that's like 50 plus comics a year, or like high 40s if you have holidays, and that's sustainable. Like 5 pages a day isn't a lot if it's your full-time job, so that's what And I said it also leaves room for a sprint. So if I get myself into a ludicrous situation like Judgment Day, like when I found myself like writing half the crossover by myself, like that was working weekends, and that was working significantly more than 5 pages a day regularly. And I felt my brain, and also I think I had COVID and was locked in the house at the end of my garden for part of it. Like we had a shed a working shed at the end of the garden in London. So like I can do it. I'd rather not. Because you burn out. That's the thing. Everyone says you burn out. So you have to plan to not work because otherwise you won't be able to work. Like comics.
That is a great quote. And I also love that you threw in, I think my ADHD is the reason to why I'm so good at comics. And I felt like, when I'm reading your Judgment Day or reading Young Avengers, I'm like, I can feel the energy in a positive way coming off and in such a way where I'm just enjoying myself. So
Thank you. Also, like, I'm aware that when I occasionally lose people, it is the fact that I jump between stuff, jump between far off points quite quickly, and that's how for these part there's a lot of stuff there. But what I specifically meant in terms of ADHD being good at comics, in terms of it's the length of work that fits my brain. I said it takes me a week to do a comic. Well, that's it, and then I go to something else. And that it's not like me working on a novel for like a year.
right.
It's the idea. This is a task broken into smaller tasks, therefore can be hyperfixated on and then completed and moving off. And it's that, and also the fact, the joy of like this. What my brain does is you can hyperfixate. So one of my friends, yes, you can write 5,000 words in an hour, if you need to, or when you say need to, it's like you have to have real external force demanding it happens. And you'll have procrastinated for the rest of the day. Like when I hear about writers who generally say, "Oh no, I write for like 12 hours a day," and they mean it, and I just can't see why they don't end up with 40,000 words. I just think, what on earth are they doing?
It's a lot of work.
And this is why people are different.
Which is a great thing, especially in a comics publishing landscape where I feel like you can get anything that you want to, at your fingertips.
Yeah.
And no matter what, you're always going to find something that you will enjoy, which I think is the beauty of it.
I love it. You're right. That's the great that fact that comics are not tied to one genre. Okay, unless you're just right. Even though superheroes are big enough that you can mix it up a bit. If I had to do 4 books that were all the same, I wouldn't be able to do comics.
For sure. But I would love to talk about all of the stuff that you're currently publishing over at Image, which of course includes Power Fantasy, and then of course we have the Wicked and Divine compendium that drops in next month, the big 1,400 pager, if I may. But to start off with Power Fantasy, the first trade of which I'm just going to say I was blown away. I didn't expect whatever it is I guess I was expecting, but I was like, man, I didn't know that I needed this, but I did. What inspired you to go out and say, I have this idea, we've got six beings that the world literally revolves around, set in that time. What got you to say, I need to write this now?
That's like not most of my ideas, but broadly speaking, there's a flow of my work. In that kind of, I'm working on something and then I have an idea that spins off in a completely different direction. Like Wicked Divine came from Young Avengers. As in, I was working Young Avengers and had this kind of like, it wasn't just Young Avengers. It was also like other stuff as well. But the idea of we could do something in this space, but more so. HBO Young Avengers was my jokey one line. And obviously WicDiv's nothing really like Young Avengers, but you can also see it at the same time. In the case of the Power Fantasy, I was writing Immortal, and I was loving Immortal. Like it's this big, small p political book about superhumans. And there was just one moment in it when I was sat myself thinking seriously about the Omegas. And it wasn't, I think it was before the Exeter Storm fight. But like, you can see in the Exeter Storm fight, actually, I put the thinking in the book. But I think these people can't fight. If we're doing it in a realistic comic, not that you have to do, realism is overrated, but if you're doing it in a more serious, less poetic mode, like if Storm and Exeter had a fight, everybody on Krakoa would be dead. Everyone in Europe would be dead.
Right.
They couldn't fight. Because we've made them too powerful over 40 years. I used to joke Nightcrawler used to get tired if he teleported twice or whatever, and now he's teleporting moons away, or whatever, and this is partially because readers really love powerful feats. They chase, yada yada. Anyway, all that kind of stuff was on my mind anyway. But specifically, these people couldn't fight. Then, oh no, that's interesting. And suddenly, just from the people too powerful to fight, you change what the book's about, but also you drill down on different themes. It's about power. I'm saying, ironically, it's still kind of core themes about power and responsibility. This is classic Spider-Man, just, right. With nuclear weapons. And so that, they all came to that core idea. And same like WicDiv. The tone came from Young Avengers, but the core idea for WicDiv was, I just thought, 12 people reincarnating, dead in 2 years. And that's about, it was my response to my dad, the news of my dad's terminal cancer, and the idea, and it's fundamentally going, hey, what's the point of life anyway? Why be an artist if you've got 70 or 50 or 40 or 20 or 2 years to live? Why the hell be an artist anyway? What's the point? So that's kind of what WicDiv's about. Um, Power Fantasy just comes from a much more like Power Fantasy is much more a meditation on nature of power. It's less that kind of like heart on sleeve bleedingness of it.
Mm-hmm.
But like the core idea was okay, people too powerful, they can't fight. Let's go. Because it's funny. It felt like, oh no, I can't forget anyone's done that. But simultaneously, it's also quite, if it excites you, it probably will excite other people. And of course, the problem with the Power Fantasy is I definitely had some retailers were a bit confused to begin with, I believe. There's that kind of like, well, what do they do then? And that like very much if you read the first issue, like you go, oh right, they do that.
They do.
And that because it becomes a book about, not about when they fight, it's about what they will do to avoid fighting. And that's interesting. I know, no joke, like I refer like the bear is an influence, I swear. I used to say Secession was an influence on Mortal X-Men, but like weirdly, the thing that really makes the Power Fantasy run is everyone loves the bear, but they got this hyper tense environment that's also quietly quite funny. And it's like, yeah, you can imagine if half the cast of the bear got nuclear weapons. How long would that restaurant exist?
Right.
Not long.
No.
So yeah, that's where the idea came from.
Interesting stuff, because I can't imagine, you having to write 6 different characters all trying to withhold their powers and at the same time creating enough tension so that you can move the plot along in places that you can go, for example. So balancing that out, I think, has to be one of the... Like, just the thought of that seems super difficult to write.
Yeah. It's actually like one of the things in classically... I mean, you get someone to talk classically about drama. They say drama is about, okay, you have trouble with the character. It's always, what's that character want? And what are they willing to do to get it? And that's what story is in the Western mode. And that's kind of story as a way for exploring someone's true nature. And that's about like all those kind of things. And the second you've got that it's a 6-way like standoff with guns pointing at each other. Okay, what will they do to get what they want? And that's the thing is you've got to have characters who want things. Even Masumi, who's the character who doesn't really want anything. She wants to relate to her power. She does want things. She wants to be left alone for a start. She wants to not destroy the earth, and she wants to be an artist.
Right.
And it's like, and all, but this, all those kind of things tied together. You got someone like Heavy. Heavy is 60 radical leftist in the White Panther mode. Like he's somebody who would remake the world if no one else is around. But like if Valentina won't let him as much, you know what I mean?
Right.
And that balance of that kind of okay, yeah, I would like to, I don't know, get rid of money, but am I willing to risk the world being destroyed to get rid of money? And that's what the story's about.
That it's such a fascinating thing to think about, right? Where you have 6 different people who all want different things, who don't necessarily want everybody wants a different thing, right? But you just get to see the different conversations that people might have with others, and that just in and of itself is brilliant and phenomenal.
Thank
and
you.
Having to figure out how to do that in an ongoing setting, right? Because it's not like it's a short story, it's you and Caspar setting this issue by issue and figuring out when the story beats are all flowing. So I guess my other question would be, when you plot and figure this out and say this is going to be the inciting incident or whatever the action might be, when do you sort of decide to say we need to set stuff balance in motion so that we can move on to whatever the next big plot thread is, especially in a serialized comic when it's not just we're writing it for the trade, it's people are reading these in singles, we want them to be satisfied with the output that they're coming out with monthly.
Yeah. Like all that is entirely true corrections, and it's also worse for the Power Fantasy because it's set across 50 years. It's set from like 45 to 99. So it's not just the story going forward, it's also okay, how are we going to explain these people's like 45-year history with each other? And since we know all that, so it becomes a question. I describe it as sequencing. Like, okay, we know in 1965 this conversation happened between these two people. When do we show it? Do we show it? And at the same time, you've got this inciting incident, which is like one of the characters does something to destabilize America in the first issue. And what happens then? And so it goes from there. I mean, of course, at the same time, it's like I plotted it quite tightly. The first 16 issues are really plotted very tightly. Like in issue 3, we've got a timeline, and we actually just say what issue things happen in, which is our it's a bit of a mic drop moment. Yeah. In that kind of like, oh yeah, issue 12, this will happen. And that's kind of like playful and but it's funny. It makes me laugh. But it's also because it's like, obviously having come from Krakoa, it's a day a page, so it's a timeline, so it's a classic Krakoa move, and it's like we can't just like censor it because that's what we did in Cocoa. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to, I don't want to repeat a move. Let's do the opposite. Let's be utterly transparent and show that, oh no, we're playing with an open hand. We know exactly what we're doing. So it's almost like it's planning the structure. And then you look and see, okay, what can happen in each issue that makes it meaningful as a plot movement? And what do people want to know at this point? And especially because I originally planned for 12 issues, and then I had a moment of like, oh no, this is way too tight. And so we pushed it to 60. Instead of being 12 and 2 arcs, it's 16 and 3 arcs. So yeah, you follow it through. Okay, and then you resequence it and say, okay, then he'll do this and that'll do that. And is there enough to keep people interested? And also like, what's the big beat? You know what I mean? And then this happens next month. What's the thing that makes people come back and say, oh, what they're going to do now? So yeah, it's a slow increase of tension. And of course, the flip of it, despite these really big structures, you've also got enough space for the characters to discover themselves. Because you may have a scene, okay, Valentina and Heavy have an argument, or like what are the details? What specific moments when characters come out? And then you've got the sequencing. And I said earlier, you've got the sequencing through time. But when I'm writing an issue, I'm sort of thinking, okay, I've got this plot line here involving these two characters, this plot line here involving these other two, and this one involving another two. How do the scenes work? Which order do we go through? How does it feel like a story? And quite like, which is kind of skills I've built up over the years, but especially Immortal X-Men feels like almost like a different level of complexity in that issues regularly are broken until the very last minute in the power fantasy. Like I'm writing these scenes and going, okay, cut this, remove it, move this to a different sequence. Like issue 4, I think is probably one of the best ones we did about Masumi, and like 2 of the scenes are reversed order when I originally wrote them. Like the one which is the climax of the sequence in the gallery was actually the penultimate one. And I very obviously realized, no, it doesn't crescendo. That one's a bigger scene. That should be last, which I know this is stating the obvious.
Right.
But what I'm trying to say, it's a book that's for me, it's a really interesting mix between incredibly overplanned and incredibly improvisational. And that's for me, I'm giving more attention to that stuff because it's so complicated in this other way, as opposed to WicDiv, which is complicated in this way too, but also was much more formalist. In this one, Caspar is absolutely taking lead on visuals. So I give a lot of ideas, but I don't see roughs until Caspar shows me final pages. He shows me occasional panels and whatever, but really it's like I want Caspar to be lead instrument on visuals, and I'm going to worry about everything else, which gives the book a very different timbre, which is kind of the fun of it. Because I've done hyper-planned visual books. In fact, I did one with Caspar, Peter Cannon, which is a Peter Cannon Thunderbolt we did for Dynamite, which if you like Watchmen and 9-panel grids, you'll be all over. So yeah, in short, I'm enjoying myself, Dom.
I'm just glad to hear that behind the pages you have something that's tightly planned, but also that you're working in harmony with Caspar Wijngaard, who I love from Homesick Pilots, and now he's over with you on Power Fantasy. And it's clear that you two are having a lot of fun in coordination with this book, page by page.
He's so good, honestly. Especially seeing Caspar play, and especially because I'm putting stuff in the book as well, but he's also putting random references in stuff. And it's it was quite someone spotted the Lupin the Third's car, like the classic anime. That turns up in the background in issue 6. Why? Because he wants to put it there. Because that's the thing about Power Fantasy. It's obviously a quite serious book. At the same time, it's also a very playful book. Like one of my favorite comparisons people have made is Authority meets The Good Place.
That's a really good one, actually.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Which speaks to one of the fun thing about The Good Place is it's a serious book about philosophy. It's a serious story about philosophy, but it's also it's a sitcom. Mm-hmm. And there's a little bit of that as in, we'll make you laugh, but also we hope there's enough people to tune in and get into it, and also get really tense in a month-by-month basis.
Speaking of Caspar, is the way that you script for him, and even specifically with this book, a little bit different in the way that you script other books, say an Axe Judgment Day with Skeety or Mortal X-Men with Lucas Wernick? How does that all work out?
I mean, when I actually teach comic writing, I do a whole big section on how to write for an artist, and there's 2 things you do to write for an artist, and I describe them as scripter's architectural blueprint and scripter's love letter. Scripter's architectural blueprint is the absolute minimum. It's the kind of okay, what do you need to do to make this image appear? What does the artist need to basically make the comic? And that could be more detail or less detail, but kind of varies depending on the story. And kind of and then it overlaps slightly with the second part, scripter's love letter, which is personalized. Because the love letters are not written to whom you may concern. Love letters are about okay, I see you like Valerio or like Caspar or Stephanie Hans or whoever, and this is what you need. and this is what you want to hear, and that is the thing that will inspire you, and this is what you're good at, and all, you know what I mean. So that is the much more the emotional connection ones, and some artists don't need that. They just need the architectural blueprint, because that's also so not writing a love letter is a kind of love letter in that way. So a part of the job is you see who they are and write it, and you build a relationship with every single artist. When I'm writing at Marvel, it's a slightly more clip style, because occasionally at Marvel you just don't know who's going to be drawing it.
Right.
Like that happened rarely, but occasionally there was sometimes, especially in Judgment Day, I think there was some bits where I had to just write something, and they sorted out who it was later. And I always try to go back and edit. With someone like Caspar, the process is changing a little. Actually, I just did a podcast myself interviewing Caspar, so on my own Decompress. So if anyone wants to listen to that, there'll be some detail. When I saw how improvisationally was in issue like 3, in terms of stuff he was doing with the long shots and montage, I started writing more of that kind of stuff. Not actually, hey, do another montage here, but as in kind of leaving it explicitly open to be interpreted. It's the thing I did with Jamie and WicDiv. We did most of it's in not in Marvel Method, just in full script, and quite often heavily gritty. And then you hit the kind of the set pieces where I move over to Marvel Method, and specifically not Marvel Method in the kind of just the story and interpret it, but Marvel Method is more like a commission, or like a description, as in like we did it at Young, as in here's a load of ideas how you could do it. Now it's not quite as far as that here, but there's an awareness of like, hey Caspar, maybe this, or maybe you want to add a few extra panels around the edge here because you're always going to, So it's that kind of you work out the rhythm.
Interesting stuff there, because sometimes I feel like different writers have a different way of how they script, and there's a billion ways of scripting a comic, right? I don't think it's just like we have this one set you need to follow to it. But it is really cool to see that you and Caspar are playing with the sort of evolution of we have something heavy at first, and now it's a lot more free-flowing.
Yeah.
I suppose, yeah.
I mean, it's still pretty. The scripts are still not exactly short. But even earlier, I wasn't Alan Mooreing it. You know what I mean? But it's almost like writing. Hey, this is because it's not just a script; it's a story. Actually, here's another example. Like some artists are like actors. They want to know not all actors. Some artists want to know the internality of their people. Like Jamie wants to know the character is not just they're lying, but like what they're lying about. And like, so in other words, he'll try to do like, okay, in 30 issues time, we're going to reveal this guy is telling a lie.
Right.
He wants to know then. And other artists really just don't. And it's like, depends how much they want to. And I definitely have some artists are much more impressionistic and emotionally driven, and they want to kind of get inside the characters. And some of the artists are much more about the externals. Just no, I'm going to draw a picture. I don't need the impressionistic aspect. You know what I mean? And this all comes to like, for me, it's like, what do they need? And you give them that. And that's kind of, for me, the job.
I'm assuming that some artists are obviously going to be different from what they prefer versus, what other creators prefer in that set. So it is really cool that he gave me the sort of, yeah.
Do you know a really banal? Here's a really it sounds like I'm being highfalutin, and some of it's just really banal. Yeah. This will nail it down to make it be less pretentious. But like Tamra Bonvillain, the awesome colorist of Once in Future, she's so good.
Love her.
But she kind of. She actually told me afterwards it was a joke, but she said it'll be really useful for you to put like at the top of every page, whether it's an external or internal or daytime, nighttime. So all the way through Once in Future, I've done, I do that for her. So like so in other words, she at a glance at the top of the page will know, okay, this is the sort of palette I'm going to need, and it saves her a bit of time. And that's, and this you said earlier, there's no set way of doing comics, and that's a strength. For me, that's kind of the point, not the point of the medium. One of the strengths of the medium is that it's not like a screenplay is written. I mean, a screenplay is written for executives and directors, and it'll be the point being it's going to be torn up. Whilst a script in comics primarily a congress between writer and artist. A love letter, as I said. Anyway, that's sorry, it's a classic me. I've given you 20 minutes on one question.
Oh man, that was perfect. I really, really appreciate it. And too, with Once in Future, with you and Dan Mora, who's doing like 1,500 books a month, it feels like nowadays. I just want to know like what the stuff behind there was. Was it because I knew that like around that time he was starting to do DC work with Mark Waid. So how is it like, I guess, seeing how Mora was balancing out between, hey, I'm doing a World's Finest issue and I'm going to be doing a Once in Future issue as well?
Honestly, like Dan's a wonder, and I say that in a kind of like, how does he do it? Like everyone says that. How can he how can he be both so good and so prolific? So like he wasn't doing stuff for DC at the start of Once the Future,
Right.
but it kind of started. But he's still kind of basically doing 2 books at Boom, and then he started doing books like about halfway through. Um, and it's amazing to watch because he's a classic modern action artist.
Yeah.
You know, he's like he's in every sense of the word. Like he's that kind of like if you were doing a mainstream book at Marvel or DC, and you were told that oh, you can have Dan Mora, no problem. Immediately, oh great, I'm fine, everything's going to be okay. So it's just really good to actually see him. But at the same time, we did 30 issues of a comic together. Like I don't think many other people are going to get 30 issues of Dan Mora. I feel like and people who like kind of love his art and his storytelling. Like I feel really sort of privileged to have that kind of. Oh no, we did this 5-volume thing together. He also writing with him, I tended to. We've only met like once before the first issue came out, so we haven't really talked much directly, just a few emails. Write in a very clean, stripped down style. That's the main kind of thing. It's very much my classic Marvel storytelling. I kind of wanted to get out of the way. He's a sort of action storyteller that I kind of like. Yeah, I'll give you some angles, and I'll give you a big idea. Like a lot of so much about What's the Future was okay. What can I get Dan Mora to draw this month? And it's okay. My big list of Arthurian stuff,
Right.
And then go, okay, Yvain. What about Yvain? Oh, we had a lion. Okay, Yvain on the back of a fire-breathing lion. That sounds fun. You know what I mean? There was that kind of level of pulp energy to it for writing for him because I didn't want him to be bored. And also I knew that like doing a different kind of book would be a waste of Dan Mora. That's what that's I said earlier. Like when I was told that Dan was available for a book by Boom, me just sat down and thought, okay, what on earth does that look like? And it's like, horror action. Does he like? So has he any interest in doing a horror action book? Was my question to him, and he evidently did. The only thing unusual about writing for Dan was that he's never been to the UK, so I put a lot of reference. It's like there was like Google Street Map views because it's all set around the southwest or London.
Mm-hmm.
Google Street Maps, shots of buildings, like the whole thing, everything he needed. And that's kind of thing. Like some people would just let the artist do the research, and it's like no, like let's make it easy for Dan as much as possible. And like especially because I was the person who wanted that. So yeah, that was the main thing, making sure that it felt like Britain.
I'm going to add in, I love the grandma. The grandma kept me every single page she was in for that book. I was like, I needed to strap in, but wonderful, wonderful stuff with Once and Future as well. I felt like you guys hit it on a nail that usually it's weird for me, like getting into fantasy or legend storytelling. Like it has to be sort of the right tone for me, but I think you guys nailed it on every single front.
Also, like I said, it's like it's retired buffet. That's the kind of the jokey one-liner. It's like old lady monster hunter. It's quite. I mean, she's basically Blade.
Yep. But a cooler one, I think.
I think she is too.
She's
like, honestly,
cool.
I don't know. I nothing but love for Blade. I'm not going to insult the guy.
No. But wonderful.
But
wonderful
yeah,
stuff.
she is cooler.
I completely
And she could have
agree.
him if it came down to it.
For sure, for sure. I want to shift it over to a couple of Wicked and Divine questions because it's another book, again, I enjoyed from you and Jamie and Matt Wilson. My gosh, it feels like
So
you
good.
and also Clayton Cowles, wherever he letters, it's like he's near you as well. And I always know, like, if I'm reading a Kieron Gillen book, it's not only just going to be tight on script, but the lettering is going to be exquisite too. And I feel like it's been every single place he's gone, whether it's a Marvel book by you guys or an Image book by you guys. I always know that it's going to be awesome. But on the subject of Wicked and Divine, what give you the inspiration for making Cassandra a god in Wicked and Divine?
Oh yeah, I said quick side point is like I mentioned interviewing Caspar, and I have also interviewed Clayton as part of the same series about the power of fantasy. So if you're interested in actually how lettering actually works and how he ends up in all these books, because he's also like Tom King's letter of choice and Kelly Sue DeConnick's letter of choice. You know what I mean? So like that's interesting stuff as well. If anyone's interested, back to Cass, like it was just immediately from the top, like with WicDiv, same as like power fantasy, the broad shapes. Like with WicDiv, I knew the arc by arc structure. As in, okay, at the end of the first arc, this happens. The end of the second arc, this happens, and this is the status quo for each arc. But I also knew like the larger plots for each character and what they're about. In other words, like Bol has done this, and we won't know until. What I didn't know is when those facts would come to light. You know what I mean? So it became I return to the phrase sequencing again. So I know the larger plot, but I also, okay, where are these story elements going to come in? Where's the best place to put them? In the case of Cass's story is complicated. There's a bunch. She's mainly, I had to phrase what Cass is about. I know most of the characters in WicDiv were about what the Greeks called hamartia, the idea of their tragic flaw. They're kind of like, these are mostly admirable people. There's a question mark there, but they're people with something which is just wrong with them. And one of the things Cassandra was wrong with is that, she's the smartest person in the room, and she can't get past that. And kind of like, and she thinks that, like, and you sort of see juxtapositions between the characters. Like, I know Amaterasu versus Cassandra are always great characters to play with, because Amaterasu isn't too bright.
No,
that's not fair. Yes, she isn't, but she's closeted and incredibly privileged, but she's also very sweet and lovable, and Cassandra isn't. And it's nice versus good. Cassandra is almost always right, and Amaterasu is almost certainly not.
Right.
But Cassandra is also mean. There's Cassandra. She hurts people without realizing, especially by the end. There's some bits, but the thing is, you start learning. You see the point of the story is these characters are slowly getting over their shit, because they're mostly teenagers or early 20-somethings. They're kind of like, oh no, I was like that. I shouldn't have done that. It's one of my favorite moments when characters kind of get a chance to grow. Because the tragedy of WicDiv is this whole 2-year thing means some of the characters never do.
Right.
You kind of hope that if Amaterasu and Cassandra actually had met, you said, we were chatting earlier before we started recording, but like how people we know have changed us. Like, that's kind of what the story is about. And if they had more time, maybe they would have changed more. But to go back to why she became a god, she's kind of somebody who doesn't. It would be the worst possible thing for her. In that kind, there's a bit element to that, as in it's a learning experience. But it's also like, it's just the big irony. It's that kind of, okay, who's going to get the last golden ticket? Who's going to get the last golden ticket to be a god? Which Laura wants so badly. Laura's the character where, she's our lead character. We're following her. Oh, her friend, or frenemy, really, at that stage, who really doesn't want it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's a big moment for Laura when Laura goes, I'm here for you anyway. In that, that kind of Laura looking after Cass. It's such it's a wonderful beat around issue 11. In that kind of, oh no, this girl's got everything I wanted, and that doesn't matter. I'm gonna get past my nonsense briefly. You know what I mean? So that's kind of the journey. Well, they were the two kind of core, and then you kind of dig into it further. Like where Cassandra, her story goes from then. As I said, the dangers of being the smartest person in the room.
For sure.
Normally, if you're the smartest person in the room, get into a bigger room. That's my
right. But I think that's part of the fun of the series. And yeah.
The other thing about Cass, of course, as a trans woman, it's quite important she's got a big story.
Yeah.
But none of it's about her being trans. This is kind of the idea that, her transness alters the story in fundamental ways, because it's the prism the story is seen through. But at the same time, it's not about her dealing with any of that. This is kind of the idea that anybody's stories can be bigger than their core identity, whilst shaped by it. That's kind of like the other important bit of Cassandra.
I think that's one of the beauties, of your book, just in general. Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, that's so important, the idea that, just that, that.
I felt the same way again in Young Avengers, and just sort of seeing you and McKelvie bring that over to Wicked and Divine has been such, like, one of the biggest blessings in reading that series in general, just for me. And even to, like, you mentioned earlier, now we were talking about it before stage, right? The sort of how a lot of people in our life can shift, and also how they can change us. Remembering what the internet was like back 10 years ago, which is crazy to think about. What are your, like, I wanted to know what your thoughts on the internet, I guess, sort of, like, how it is now comparatively, because you have one of the issues with Tara where he just lets loose on a torrent of internet hate, and how it sort of now feels a lot of true, like, it feels true to life, but also somehow is quaint compared to the state of the world and how it's now. Is it something that you think about or going back to?
I think in some ways you could say the modern internet was born when WicDiv was happening. Like, you can see Gamergate as a kind of dry run for MAGA, and that's the most depressing sentence that anyone could possibly say about the 21st century. You know what I mean? Like, all the same tactics, all this, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, and of course, I'm an ex-games journalist. I just got out of games journalism before all that happened. I know some of the major players, some of the people talked about, and, that. Tara and the larger scale things is relatively tame. I think you're right, it's an artifact of the thing being born. But at the same time, it's also the panopticon of the internet and how it affects people. there's definitely the kind of aspect of like Tara, and a lot of the stuff is the fundamental humanity of everybody. There's a bit of that, and that kind of like turning people into the objects, like, and what social media tends to do, the idea of turning human beings into, all that stuff. Which, as I said, this is kind of the birth of the modern internet. Where things got just big enough for the mass. The point of Twitter being a bit dumb and playful kind of disappeared and just became a knife fight. And it's kind of like, and I'm enjoying Blue Sky right now.
Me
I
too.
think it's fun. But it's like we're just methadone, like it's not going to get any better. I think that nuclear block's really good on it, but I think there's a fundamental problem with mass dynamics and how that leads to mobs. I mean, Spurrier's got one. Spurrier's very much a kind of he's got a really good one-liner. I forgot it, but the kind of like the mass dynamics is just not good for the human brain, and it makes us the distance of a screen and the idea of turning people into things. I turn back to Pratchett. It's a really one of Pratchett's best one-liners was always the most evil is treating people like they're things, and I think it's very easy for that. Everything we had on the online, which is what Tara is about people as things, as people as entertainment. Anyway, yeah, I agree. It is a period piece, but it's also a period piece that happens every day now still.
It definitely does,
and it's still it's still not fun to happen if it happens to you.
I just felt like WicDiv, very much I think ahead of its time, and very much still in that piece of we get to see sort of the evolution of how the internet, or the modern internet as we do have it now, sort of came to be. And I think you were one of the pioneers of that, just to lay that all out there and forward.
Thank you. We felt like Young Avengers and WicDiv, we thought we were at least on it in certain ways. Like even stuff like how we use phones, how characters how they use social media, like like oh you're going to posting pictures is a thing that matters. I know that sounds incredibly obvious to people now,
right?
But it's like Jamie used to say, like before this you could always tell if somebody was doing a crowd scene right if somebody got their phone out, because this is what people do. We live in a world where these things happen, and it seems a weird denial to say they're not.
Right.
But it's really nice doing a story in 99 where I don't have to worry about that as much. In terms of the power fantasy.
For sure. And I'm wondering, is there any way that you and Jamie could, maybe tell Image? Because I love big books. Like, I love the Omnis and all of those hardcovers. I was wondering if there's any way that you could, because we have the compendium coming up, I wonder if there's any way that you guys would be able to tell Image, hey, we'd love to get those 4 big hardcovers all reprinted someday.
We could, like, the production of it is harder.
It is.
Like, it's that kind of, like, we try to hype, especially 3 and 4, where retailers just ordered it less for some reason, and they're like gold dust. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those bits where you sort of drum your fingers going, yep, people are leaving a lot of money on the table here. I say it with a lot of my retailer friends. Hardcovers are expensive. Like that's stating the obvious. Yep. Reprinting hardcovers is expensive. I mean, we reprinted the Die hardcover, mm-hmm. and we've wiped out our profits for the 6 months. And so we're going to start making money. So we will get money eventually, but in terms of cash flow, it breaks it. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to do 4 hardcovers to reprint, which is the only point, like it gets really complicated. And it's that kind of like, yeah, there's probably money there, but it's also probably not worth it right now. But at the same time, never say never. Like we always got, because I see how much money people are buying like WicDiv hardcovers for, and it makes me frustrated that anyone is having to spend those money. Like you think about maybe a Kickstarter, maybe that would work. You do those, especially because I just got we had the WicDiv covers book, which is we did a Kickstarter last year for this beautiful collection of all the. My copy just arrived this morning, and it's astoundingly good looking, and the Kickstarter's gone really well. So you never know, but I think it's more like if we're going to reprint the hardcovers, there would probably be a reason for it. It's like let's say a TV show happened. Like something like that, something that's big enough to justify. Oh no, it's worth having a swing on this. But if we could do it magically, I would do it. But the thing is, I think the compendium's actually, it's not quite the same thing as a hardcover, obviously. But like, I think it's gonna be a really nice package, and it's gonna allow people. Yeah, it's like good money for the whole thing. In a convenient thing. I think people are gonna be very into it, and we're very excited by it too. And we wish if we were organised, we got it out last year. But we didn't. It's in the 10-year anniversary.
But hey, at least you got it out. I know that one of my friends, Joe Loves Comics, he loves the Image compendiums. I think they're wonderfully done. Like, I don't have any myself, but some of my friends have gotten them, and I've seen them. And I'm like, these are super cool. Like, just to have the 800 to 1500 page stories all collected in there at a price point that makes sense for everybody, I think.
Yeah, it's like a novel. Actually, you mentioned earlier that the Die hardcover that I reprinted that, but that makes sense to reprint as well because it's easier because it's only just one volume. As in like, oh no, this is the only one we need to reprint. Ooh, lovely. Yeah, but you know what I mean, like, and I think like I've got a few of the omnibuses, and they're big and heavy, and like but I kind of like it feels like an excitable mass market paperback in some ways, like one of those it's a really chunky boy, but also like not too much. I mean, like, a lot of money, but still not like what I mean. It's not quite this. In some ways, I almost find with the compacts, the which I genuinely love all the DC
The
compact
DC, yeah.
editions. Yeah, as in like, this is a value proposition that people are just interested and like, okay, get it in one go and read it in this kind of accessible, like relatively cheap format, relatively.
Right. Because I don't know how much it is over there across the pond, but over here it's $9.99. I feel like it's just an oversized comic at my shop for me. I don't have to worry about discounts or anything else. I'm like, this is $10. I mean, it's just another single issue. And some of them are like 300, 400 pages. You're like, this is great value for the story.
Yeah. It's that kind of like, and the only reason it works, it's the same reason manga is mostly printed like it's so cheap in these markets, is that it's already been paid for. Like when you've got like Watchmen, they've made the money from Watchmen, so it doesn't matter about selling it at $10. They can take the swing, and they also know there's a market because they've made that amount of money.
Right.
And that's the same thing as these big compendiums. Like these are series that people have proved really popular, and it's that kind of now you can definitely give it to people in a completely different format as well.
Yeah, like Jonathan Hickman and Nick Dragotta's East of West, for example, I think it's coming out next month too, and it's also coming out in a compendium. I'm like, it's cool that Image is making them.
I'll buy it. I mean, A, it's great, but B, like, it's also, I've got that in single issues, so maybe
yeah, same.
I'll buy it for the shelves. Like slightly hard. I'll give those guys my money again.
Because I have East of West in singles, and I've also got the hardcovers. I'm like, man, I don't care. It's Jonathan Hickman, it's Nick Dragotta. I love their books. Yeah. I'll buy it. Yeah.
Actually, the Sex Criminal one's really nice as well. Like that's the kind of that's it was such a great wave of Image books circa then. There's like WicDiv did really well, but one of the major reasons it did really well is because there were so many other books that done really well before us. And it was a kind of a wave of really cool things. It kind of feels a little bit like where Image is right now. There's really cool stuff happening. Like it's one reason, like in the back of Power Fantasy, I'm writing about other books. I'm doing interviews with other creators, and partly because I think mutual support is really important.
Yeah,
especially in Image when you haven't got nothing, but it's us against the world, and like it's us together against the world, which is fun.
A little bit of bonding in together. I love seeing
exactly.
Bond in, and
if you see me on Blue Skies, I'm doing a sort of a weekly what you're excited about in comics thread. Like we reads comics is the hashtag, and the thing is, okay, what are people reading? That's just it's an interesting, intimate medium is comics.
I think I have to join in on the fun because I use Blue Sky. People tag at me or whatever all the time, but I'm like, man, I need to talk to you guys more often. It just seems more fun to do it like that. But I have to ask a couple of excellent questions before we hop off, if I may.
I would love to.
Because I am still just in shock at the 2 years or so that you were there and writing Sinister and everything else. You know what? That's actually the one character that I have to pop in, because I think what you have done with Mister Sinister has been absolutely phenomenal, and on top of that, groundbreaking for the character. And comparatively to what we had with Claremont and Post, I think if you want to talk about the hokey jokey, fun to play with Sinister that you embellished in, Jonathan Hickman took, and Zeb Wells took in Hellions, how did you come up with saying we need to change the character for Sinister? Might as well do it here. Obviously, pre-Krakoa, but how were you able to be inspired by that?
Yeah, honestly, like you mentioned, like both like Hellions and what Hickman did, like astounding work. In fact, only can I realise that. Actually, I'll dial back a bit. When I jumped on X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, I remember me and Nick Lowe sitting in the bar in a random pub near the British Museum in central London, and just talking about what we're going to do or what could we do. And we basically went through all the X-Men villains and who can we use. And like everyone has either just been used or or wasn't very good. So we just basically listed her, okay, who's a major X-Men villain we can actually use, and Sinister was the only person who really had both the weight and it's okay. I'll have a think about Sinister, who was a character I didn't like. It's not like I had like I'm not a huge 90s. I wasn't reading comics in the 90s,
Right.
so Sinister's somebody I knew mainly for reputation. And obviously I'd seen him in various things over the years. So I went and just read everything and did a deep dive and thought, okay, I kind of had the same moment when I was with Exodus, and they're kind of like, this guy is significantly weirder than he's been written.
Right.
Like in the case, this guy knew Darwin. Like there's so much reading those the Milligan written issues of the further adventure of Cyclops and Jean, his origin story. Okay, it's digging really into that. Okay, he's a British eugenicist, and that was suddenly more interesting than like okay, also he had half his personality cut out because of love, essentially. Right. That bit I wasn't very interested in until like, you know what I mean? But like he couldn't get over his wife and kid dying, so he basically became an unfeeling monster. And I didn't like I came back to that with Jerry's Dr. Stasis down the line. But there's lots of it, and I ended up picking okay, and the other problem with Sinister I kind of mainly got was he didn't have a goal. His goal was kind of escape. He was the classic sort of 90s villain. He had a lot of plans that never went anywhere. And for me, it was like, okay, let's give him a plan. Something really rock solid. And he can try to do that. So all these kind of ideas, I chewed it around. And part of it was just, there is a campness to Sinister even before I got hold of him. There's a coldness, but he's called, obviously we all know the original origin, the idea was he was a kid's character idea. That's what Claremont was going to do with him. But like, you got him and his boys, and they all look like glam rock stars. There's a fundamental like drag persona campness to him. So I figured, why not? Like the idea, like of that, and of course, like, it's worth noting how I did it. As in the idea of Mister Sinister, the performance. Mister Sinister is this kind of this mask, the mask of it. The idea, and there's nothing behind the mask though. That's the horror of Sinister for me. And the first thing he does in Uncanny is basically he's reinventing himself, and then because that was my kind of backdoor. Maybe people won't like this. That's always like people could always just go back to original Sinister personality because he's changed it. He's explicitly retconned his brain. Right. I'm going to be like this now because it's the same reason I give in Immortal later is why is he so less powerful than he used to be? He's chosen to be less powerful because people underestimate me more now. People, there's what I mean. There's always just as well as of course, it's just a bit more fun. Like I'm not going to the reason why those characters in the 90s were so powerful is because they were meant to fight entire teams of X-Men. That's the real reason for it.
Right.
He just felt like there was the element. He just felt a bit broken. Like, and I couldn't like that kind of like I wanted to square some various aspects. The difference between my early Sinister and later was it was way too complicated. I think the bits that worked, people ran with. You know what I mean? Like seriously, it went like those first 3 issues of Uncanny X-Men are basically me explaining who Sinister is now. And that's way too much. Like I remember Jason Aaron doing his villain in his first 3 issues, and he did it in half a page.
Right.
And I'm like, I may have misthought this. Maybe people are interested in the idea of the British class system as a superhero. But the bit that kept is the personality, but also just the fun of the mad scientist. And specifically, the bit that kept was I was only aware of this towards the end of my run is the idea of him just using the X-Men superpowers as weapons, and then that's the bit that's good. And that's good in a way which people can. I said, okay, I'll get. What's it? iBoy meets Cyclops into floating death drone. As a writer, that's fun to write. It's also fun to watch. As in, what on earth is he going to do with these? And it also speaks to the fundamental thing I forgot about Sinister. As in, Sinister loves mutants. He doesn't think they're people though.
Right.
And he doesn't think anyone's people. And he thinks mutants are incredibly interesting and powerful. But the mutant gene is the only thing interesting about them. So in some ways, he's actually close to Magneto. Like but he takes it further to the point of mutant essentialism. In the idea that not even saying like the idea of the mutantness can be separated from the personness, which is a different form of objectification. And of course, this for me came back to like the 19th century colonialism, which I thought was one of the interesting aspects. This all comes from the British Empire, which I thought was more interesting than aligning him with fascism, aligning him. It's telling like Sinister's got a contradictory backstory, but for me it was kind of important. Oh no, he's British Empire and then he's like American,
right?
Because it's like he's not their problem, he's our problem,
right?
Anyway, so all that stuff. So make him fun, and I just didn't pursue, because the first time he was used after I left, it was kind of back to old Sinister again, which I thought that's fine. But then I saw Hickman. Hickman in Secret Wars used him, and it was instantly, oh no, he's using my guy. And that is the most sincere compliment any writer can give to another in terms of going, oh no, I like that, I'm going to do it too.
And that's how it's done. He did it twice.
Yeah, and then of course people picked up, and then it's like, oh no, this guy's more interesting to be around. And a lot of my stuff is like looking at if the character already works, you just do it. But if the character's broken, you want to fix them. It's like, it's that kind of, I could fix you.
Right.
But it's like, I said Exodus as well was a great person. Me looking at Exodus and reading him and going, this guy is weird. He's like a crusader who's slept for 900 years and thinks he's a devout Christian, but also a mutant extremist. How does that work? And then you start digging and you try to create someone who's a bit more weirder than Mike normally.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And on top of that, you made him sort of the final boss, right? As this, hey, we got the end of this all coming, and the Enigma Dominion in him. It's the final stage. How did you come about to that decision?
Yeah, it's like I knew. I mean, I always knew as Enigma in the. Okay, this is going to expand outwards. Like, I would not take anything I say is bitty. Especially, I've sort of explained why I did Sinister, and there's about 5 million fragments in there, and any individual one I could talk about at length. So anyone listening goes, that doesn't make sense. You're probably right. But together, it's like a multi-fragmented view of existence. In the case of Enigma, it was originally my plot. I was thinking, if Sinister wants, the Dominion threat is the thing that exists, he wants to become a Dominion, I guess. He wants to get out. Can you win this game? Because it's like the thing about, the Sinister Dominion, Enigma as I called it, was a significantly different kind of Dominion, because the idea of the Dominions, they're kind of merged, hyperplex personality things. There's so many intelligences. And the point of like Enigma is, it's exactly the same, but they're all him. The idea of like, there's 10 trillion people in here, but they're all me, which is literally the most egotistical thing anyone has ever done. The real thing, when I got to the end game and realized, it was kind of like looking at the line, both my story, but also look at the story that John started. And it was very clear that we're going to have to come back to the Dominions. That this is kind of the story that we started all the way back there. How can I try to wrap that up? And with what I've already put in motion. So it's going, okay, Enigma then. Like, Enigma is going to be, we're going to bring the Dominions forward a bit, and we're going to bring back to the fundamental theme of us versus them, which is what the Dominions were really about. In fact, the whole story that, in my opinion, that John was creating was about us versus them, false dichotomies. And also, like, the Dominions were cold and distant, and I don't mean that in a good way. But, like, they can't just arrive as this. It being an enemy, which also an enemy that grew from Krakoa, brought a human face to what is actually an intellectual conceit. And that's kind of the real that's the you know what I mean? And the second you've got somebody doing that, and you also tie back to the fundamental sin of Krakoa, which is, of course, getting Sinister aboard anyway. Okay, that's not the only sin, but that's one of the...
It's a pretty big one.
Yeah, it's like, all that kind of thing. So that's the main part. It's like, okay, we've got to bring the Dominions back, and we probably have to have a human element to it, by which I mean like a human connection in terms of emotional storytelling. So it's me, wrapping up John's plot, wrapping up my plots, trying to make it feel coherent in a very small space.
What this means is that we need to get you back on my channel at some point just to talk 1 hour about Hope Summers and Mister Sinister and just pick it apart one by one, because there's just so much there. I feel
that's
like
so fun. I was like doing that. Hope is, of course, I wrote like Generation Hope and Uncanny X-Men, and I did feel like, the AVX is a great story in lots of ways. I did feel it kind of underplayed Hope a little. Like, and I think Hope has kind of been lost a bit ever since. So I wasn't always planning to sort of do what I did to Hope, but I was always aware that I was going to go back to the Phoenix and I was going to go something with Hope. And especially because, the thing with Hope is, why did I do it? I realized, Resurrection, I knew going in that Resurrection would have to go away at the end of Krakoa. It's not really the end of the Krakoan age until, as long as that status quo is in play. I knew that was just going to happen. And you had to make, how are you going to do that? You've got to make one of the elements of the thing really more important than the others. And then you've got to imply it's different, and then you've got to take her away. So Hope Summer has essentially died to save everybody else. I remember actually like some Sync fans being quite annoyed, saying that why can't Sync do this? And it's like, no, Sync can't do it. If Sync can do it, I'm gonna have to kill Sync too. It's just kind of like, it's like I was desperately trying to save as many people as I could. Still, but yeah, I think I gave her an ending. I wish I had more issues, but it was nice to sort of tie it in a knot.
What an absolutely tremendous era again of X-Men, one that I am been fortunate to read and enjoy in real time as all of those issues were coming out. And I also would like to thank you, Kieron, for joining me and talking to me about your work, the process, the pitches, the inspiration, and all of the different fundamentals that go in when you create your comics. So thank you.
Thank you. So honestly, it's been delightful to talk. I've been slightly fried, so I apologise to everybody. But it's just really fun to talk, and as I said, I feel very blessed. So I'll see you around.
Thank you. Have a good one, everybody. And subscribe, like, and all the things.